What if I told you that the most powerful advocate in WWE history just had his entire world turned upside down in a single moment? What if the man who stood beside Brock Lesnar, CM Punk, and Roman Reigns through their greatest triumphs was just shown the door by the very company he helped build into a global empire? This isn't speculation. This isn't clickbait. Something seismic just happened in WWE, and Paul Heyman's future with the company hangs by a thread. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will change everything you thought you knew about the power structure in professional wrestling. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine walking into WWE headquarters on what seems like an ordinary Tuesday morning. The coffee's brewing, production meetings are happening, and somewhere in Stamford, Connecticut, Triple H is sitting in his office, the weight of an entire wrestling empire on his shoulders. He's the chief content officer, the creative mastermind, the man who transformed NXT into a wrestling revolution. But today, something's different. Today, he's about to make a decision that will send shockwaves through every locker room, every arena, and every wrestling fan's living room across the planet. Paul Heyman, the special counsel, the wise man, the advocate who could sell ice to an Eskimo and make them thank him for the privilege. For decades, this man has been the voice of the voiceless, the strategist behind some of the most devastating championship reigns in WWE history. He didn't just manage wrestlers, he elevated them. He transformed them from athletes into legends. Brock Lesnar became the beast incarnate under his guidance. CM Punk's pipe bomb era was amplified by Heyman's genius. And Roman Reigns, the tribal chief himself, reached heights no one thought possible with Heyman whispering strategy in his ear. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. Behind the scenes, tensions have been building like a pressure cooker ready to explode. You see, when Triple H took over creative control from Vince McMahon, everyone assumed it would be business as usual. But Triple H isn't Vince. He has a different vision, a different philosophy, and most importantly, different ideas about who should have power and influence in his company. And Paul Heyman, with all his brilliance and all his contributions, represents something from the old guard that doesn't quite fit into the new WWE landscape. Let me take you back for a moment. Remember when Heyman was running ECW? The man was a revolutionary. He took wrestlers that nobody wanted, gave them a platform, and created a counterculture movement that changed professional wrestling forever. Stone Cold Steve Austin, Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, they all cut their teeth in Heyman's extreme playground. When ECW folded, WWE scooped him up because they knew what he brought to the table: creativity that couldn't be taught, instincts that couldn't be replicated, and a connection with the audience that was simply magical. Fast forward through the years. Heyman became the advocate for Brock Lesnar, and together they redefined what it meant to be a special attraction in WWE. Every Heyman promo was an event. Every appearance felt important. He had this way of making you believe that his client wasn't just better than everyone else, they existed on a completely different level. The crowd would boo, they would chant, they would hang on every single word because Paul Heyman understood something fundamental about professional wrestling: it's not about the moves, it's about the moments. Then came the Roman Reigns partnership, and oh my god, what a partnership it was. When Roman turned heel and aligned with Heyman, the entire wrestling world shifted on its axis. Suddenly, the man who had been rejected by fans for years became the most compelling character in all of WWE. The tribal chief was born, and Heyman was right there, not just as a mouthpiece, but as an essential component of the storytelling. Week after week, they dominated SmackDown. Championship reign after championship reign, they crushed everyone in their path. It was beautiful, it was brutal, and it was pure Heyman magic. But success breeds complacency, and complacency breeds problems. Here's what started happening behind the curtain. Triple H began noticing patterns. Creative meetings where Heyman would push for certain directions that didn't align with the overall vision. Backstage politics where Heyman's influence seemed to extend beyond his official role. Rumors started circulating, whispers in catering, conversations in the locker room. Some said Heyman was becoming too powerful. Others claimed he was stepping on toes, making enemies, burning bridges with other producers and writers who felt their ideas were being overshadowed. And then there were the business decisions. WWE is no longer just a wrestling company, it's a content machine, a corporate entity with shareholders and quarterly earnings reports. Triple H has to answer to people now, people who care about metrics and demographics and brand partnerships. Paul Heyman, for all his genius, comes from a different era. He's an artist in a world that's increasingly becoming about algorithms and analytics. He wants to tell stories that make people feel something. Corporate wants stories that move the needle on social media engagement and drive merchandise sales. The breaking point came during a recent creative meeting, and I've heard the details from multiple sources close to the situation. They were discussing the future of one of WWE's top storylines, and Heyman had strong opinions about the direction. He's never been one to hold back his thoughts, you know that if you've ever heard him speak. He laid out his vision, detailed, passionate, the kind of pitch that would have sold Vince McMahon in a heartbeat. But Triple H listened, nodded, and then very calmly explained why they were going in a completely different direction. What happened next was the kind of confrontation that becomes legendary in wrestling lore. Heyman, never one to back down from a fight, pushed back. Not disrespectfully, but firmly. He made his case about why his approach would resonate with the audience, why it honored wrestling tradition while pushing boundaries. Triple H appreciated the passion but stood his ground. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a directive. The tension in that room must have been suffocating. Other producers and writers sat there watching two absolute titans of the industry engaged in a creative battle that had implications far beyond just one storyline. Here's where it gets really interesting. In the old WWE, under Vince McMahon's leadership, Heyman had a certain level of protection. Vince understood Heyman's value, respected his mind, and gave him latitude that few others enjoyed. But Triple H, despite his own legendary status, runs things differently. He values collaboration, but he also demands alignment. If you're not on board with the vision, if you're constantly pulling in a different direction, you become a problem rather than a solution. And problems, in the corporate world of modern WWE, get eliminated. The decision to fire Paul Heyman wasn't made in anger. From what I understand, it was actually made with a heavy heart. Triple H knows what Heyman has contributed to the business. He knows the history, the accolades, the moments that will live forever in highlight reels. But he also knows that running WWE in 2025 requires tough decisions. You can't let sentiment cloud judgment. You can't keep someone on board just because of their past accomplishments if they're not fitting into the future you're trying to build. So picture the scene. Triple H calls Heyman into his office. The door closes. For a moment, there's just silence. Two men who have been in this business for decades, who have seen it all, done it all, achieved things most people only dream about. Triple H starts talking, and with every word, Heyman realizes this isn't a creative discussion. This isn't a negotiation. This is the end of an era. His era with WWE is coming to a close, effective immediately. Now, I want you to think about what this means for the current WWE landscape. Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, the undisputed champion, suddenly finds himself without his Wiseman. The entire dynamic of his character was built on that relationship. Heyman was the voice of reason, the strategic mind, the advocate who validated Roman's dominance. Without him, how does Roman's character evolve? Does he become even more ruthless, more isolated? Does he find a new advocate, someone who could never quite fill those shoes? Or does this create an opportunity for a completely fresh direction that none of us saw coming? And what about the other talent that Heyman has worked with over the years? Wrestlers who respected his mind, who learned from his promos, who watched him operate and absorbed lessons about psychology and storytelling. The locker room is going to feel this loss. Some will see it as an opportunity to step up and fill the creative void. Others will view it as a warning, a reminder that nobody is untouchable in the new WWE, regardless of their legacy or contributions. Let's talk about the fans for a moment, because this is where it gets emotional. Paul Heyman has been a constant presence in wrestling for over 30 years. Multiple generations of fans grew up watching him, listening to him, being entertained by him. He's been called into the ring at WrestleMania, he's cut promos that trend worldwide, he's been involved in storylines that people will be talking about 50 years from now. To suddenly not have him as part of WWE programming feels wrong to so many people. It feels like losing a piece of wrestling history in real time. Social media exploded when the news started breaking. Hashtags started trending immediately. Fan reactions ranged from disbelief to anger to sadness. Some defended Triple H's decision, arguing that change is necessary for growth and that no one should be bigger than the company. Others fired back, claiming that WWE is making a massive mistake by letting go of one of the greatest minds the business has ever known. The debate raged for hours, with passionate arguments on both sides, and honestly, both perspectives have merit. But here's something interesting that not everyone is talking about. Paul Heyman being fired from WWE doesn't mean Paul Heyman is done with professional wrestling. This man is a survivor. He's reinvented himself more times than most people have had hot meals. When ECW went bankrupt, people thought he was finished. He came back stronger. When his first run with WWE ended, critics said his best days were behind him. He proved them wrong. If you think a corporate decision is going to keep Paul Heyman down, you haven't been paying attention to his entire career. There are already whispers, rumors circulating in wrestling circles about what could be next. Could Heyman show up in another promotion? AEW would probably back up a Brinks truck to get him. Imagine Paul Heyman with a microphone in an AEW ring, the creative freedom to work with talent like Kenny Omega or MJF. The possibilities are mind-blowing. Or maybe he goes completely independent, starts his own project, something digital and innovative that reflects his understanding of modern media. Paul Heyman with complete creative control and no corporate restrictions? That could be absolutely revolutionary. And let's not forget about Brock Lesnar. The Beast Incarnate has always been fiercely loyal to Heyman. Their relationship goes beyond professional, it's personal. Brock doesn't talk much, but when he does, he's made it clear that Heyman is family to him. How does Brock react to this news? Does he demand meetings with Triple H? Does he reconsider his own WWE status? Brock Lesnar is one of the biggest stars in the history of the business, and if he's unhappy with how his advocate was treated, that could create ripple effects that extend far beyond just this one decision. Think about the timing of all this as well. WWE is in the middle of a creative resurgence. The product has been praised by critics, ratings have been strong, fan engagement is up. Triple H's vision for the company seems to be working, but firing Paul Heyman feels like a gamble, a calculated risk that could either solidify Triple H's authority and direction or create internal friction that undermines the momentum they've built. Only time will tell which outcome becomes reality. I keep thinking about all the younger talent who won't get the chance to work with Heyman now. The up-and-coming stars who could have benefited from his wisdom, his experience, his ability to craft a promo that elevates everyone involved. That's the real loss here, not just what Heyman has already contributed, but what he still had left to give. All those future WrestleMania moments, those championship reigns, those storylines that could have been legendary, they're now just possibilities that will never be realized. But you know what? Wrestling is cyclical. Careers end and begin. People leave and return. Nothing is truly permanent in this business. How many times have we seen someone get fired or quit WWE, only to come back years later for one more run, one more moment in the spotlight? Hulk Hogan did it. Bret Hart did it. Even CM Punk, who seemed like he would never reconcile with WWE, eventually made his peace with the company before moving on again. So while Paul Heyman's current chapter with WWE appears to be closing, who's to say there won't be another chapter down the road? The wrestling business is built on moments, and this is undeniably one of those moments. Years from now, people will talk about the day Triple H fired Paul Heyman. They'll debate whether it was the right decision. They'll analyze how it impacted WWE's trajectory. They'll wonder what could have been if things had gone differently. That's the beauty and the tragedy of professional wrestling. Every decision creates a branching path of infinite possibilities, and we only get to see one timeline play out. So where does this leave us? Triple H has made a statement, whether intentional or not, that the new WWE operates by different rules. Legacy and past contributions matter, but they don't guarantee job security. Paul Heyman, one of the most brilliant minds in wrestling history, is now on the outside looking in. And the entire wrestling world is watching to see what happens next, how Roman Reigns adjusts, how the creative direction shifts, and most importantly, what Paul Heyman does with this unexpected freedom. Because if there's one thing we know about Paul Heyman, it's that you can fire him, but you can't silence him. You can remove him from your building, but you can't erase his influence. And you absolutely cannot count him out, because that man has been beating the odds and exceeding expectations since before most of today's wrestlers were even born. This story is far from over. In fact, it feels like it's just beginning, and I'll be here to break down every development, every twist, every shocking turn as this situation continues to unfold. If you found this coverage valuable, if you want to stay ahead of the biggest stories in wrestling, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment below telling me your thoughts on this situation. Do you think Triple H made the right call, or is WWE going to regret this decision? And smash that like button to let me know you want more in-depth analysis like this. The wrestling world never stops moving, and neither do we. I'll see you in the next one.